So according to YouTube analytics and YouTube suggestions, one video topic that is apparently very often requested amongst channels like mine are what are the best cheap metal distortion pedals. So that is what this video is all about here today.
Just play the damn thing.
That is correct. This is my video of the my top 10 cheap metal distortion pedals. The definition of the word cheap that I'm using, at least for the purposes of this video, is anything under $100. So some of these pedals are new, some of these pedals are out of production. You got to search the used market, but generally speaking, you should be able to find all of them for under the $100 price point, unless something has changed that I'm not aware of. Now, I did do a video a while back about the greatest metal distortion pedals. However, that video was not about the greatest cheap metal distortion pedals, so don't confuse me for rehashing an old topic that I've already talked about. This one's different. Number 1, the Bayang metal end distortion. There is actually two versions of this pedal. There is the version that I'm holding up here. This is what they call the Metal End Pro. And then they also have the other version that you see right here that is called the Metal End King. The only visual difference that you can see between the two are the Metal End King. There's actually a crown graphic right above the N in the word end. That's the only visual difference. Beyond that, they look identical. Sound-wise, on the other hand, the Metal End Pro, while it does still really good sounding pedal, the Metal End King is the same pedal but has upgraded components on the inside of it, and it does sound a little bit better. I did a shoot out of these two pedals a while back, and still when people view that video, most people in the comment section still seem to think that the King version is in fact the superior version. That said, this one doesn't sound bad at all. Both of these pedals have a lot of a lot to offer. You might see there's lots of knobs and switches and stuff on here to choose from. Lots of ways to shape your tone, and there's even an amp sim slash cab simulator that you can use should you decide to run this thing direct to a PA or your mixing board or something of that nature. Lots of options to choose from, and both of these, I think the Pro version you can buy for 60 or 70 bucks, and then the King version is like 80 or 90. Very, very affordable. And probably a lot cheaper than that if you happen to stumble across one on the used market. Number 2, the TC Electronic Fangs metal distortion. Now, TC Electronic several years back put out this series of pedals that I refer to as the Smorgasbord series. I don't think TC Electronic ever really named this series, but when they first announced it, all the guitar magazines and the website and everything were all advertising it as the Smorgasbord of tone. So ever since then, I've called them the Smorgasbord series for lack of anything better to call them. This was the metal distortion offering out of that series. You might notice there's that three-way switch right there in between all the knobs. That's actually your mode switch. And you can switch, basically adjust the mid-range on it. So you can go from raw to fat to scoop. Just being quite honest, the scoop mode on this thing is totally worthless. There's no mid-range in it whatsoever. So if you don't like mid-range, that's probably the mode for you. On the other hand, I tend to prefer the raw and fat modes much better myself. But regardless, whichever mode I am personally using, I think that it gets a really, really good sound out of it. This one I think you can still buy brand new for about 60 bucks, give or take, and used you can find them all over the place for 30 or 40. Number 3, the IANZ Super Metal. I've gone on my channel about how fascinated I am with the IANZ Super Metal distortion circuit. Because there's been several versions of this pedal that have come out over the years between both the IANZ and the Maxon brands, and I just recently bought the last one that I didn't have, and so there will be a shootout of all of those coming up soon. Regardless, it's a really, really cool sounding distortion pedal, and it's what I like about IANZ distortions. Their high gain distortions in particular, they don't seem to overdo it on the gain control. You can turn it all the way up, and it still doesn't quite get real muddy. It still doesn't get real muddy or fizzy like a lot of other high gain distortion pedals do. It seems to they seem to pay real close attention to the distortion / gain control in particular Lots of other interesting tone shaping options on this pedal as well, including edge, punch, and attack controls. So it's not just your standard EQ. And while it's kind of hard to see, you might notice that the knobs on this thing, the top 2 knobs anyway, are actually concentric knobs, so they're actually 4 knobs. So this is actually, even in a teeny tiny little stomp box size, this is actually a 5 knob distortion pedal. Pretty cool. Brand new, these things cost about $119. You know, that's over the price point that we're talking about. However, used, you can find them well under $100, usually 60, 70, 80 bucks. Before I turned on the camera to shoot this video, I took a quick look, and Guitar Center's website actually has a used one of these up right now for $56.99. That's a steal. Number 4, the Ibanez TM5 thrash metal distortion. Speaking of Ibanez metal distortion pedals, this is another one that I was very, very much impressed by, and as its namesake implies, seems to lend itself very, very well to the thrash metal genre of the late 90s and early 2000s. One of my favorite metal genres. This thing's pretty basic. It's, you know, these Ibanez 5 Series pedals all came in plastic housings. So, you know, but they are still actually pretty well built. They're not nearly as flimsy as like the Behringer plastic housing pedals by any means. This one's got some stability to it. It'll take a bit of a beating, but because of that, most of these 5 Series pedals are actually pretty cheap. This one, the prices on this one vary a little bit. I've seen them run upwards of 60 bucks or so, maybe even a little bit more than that. However, if you look hard enough, you can find them for, you know, in the $40 range, and sometimes you might get lucky like I did. I bought this thing for $22 on eBay, making this the cheapest pedal on our list today. Ibanez thrash metal distortion. I just did a demo of this pedal pretty recently on my channel. Go check it out. Number 5 is the Xgear Crush Overdrive. This is the only overdrive pedal on this list, and I recognize this is supposed to be a list about distortion pedals, not overdrive pedals, but the gain stage on this thing really, really does lend itself that it can be used either way. It's certainly a great high gain overdrive, but it's also a great high gain distortion. Xgear contacted me a couple of years ago, wanted me to demo this thing. You know, they're like, I want to send you a Crush Overdrive. I'm like, no, I really kind of want to check out this distortion you guys have instead. They said, trust me, I'm going to send you the Crush Overdrive. You're going to have a lot more fun with this one. And they were absolutely right. I'm glad that they know me better than I do and sent me this pedal, because it's a great, great overdrive. One of my favorite high gain overdrives in all, you know, period, but this entire collection. That's a good one. Now, should you decide that you just absolutely have to have the distortion out of that series instead, that one there is called the Max Metal Distortion. Again, another excellent distortion pedal. 4 knobs plus a three-way boost switch for high, low, and off, depending on how you want to use it. 5 knobs, counting the gain control there in the middle. And it's a great sounding distortion pedal, really is. You know, you would kind of looking at it, you would think it's kind of a tribute or a clone of a metal zone or something like that, but it's really not. It's really kind of its own thing. And both of these pedals you can buy out there on the interwebs for about 99 bucks a piece or less. So Amazon, or, you know, there's probably a few other sites. I'll make sure and post links to all these pedals down in the description below. Number 6. The Proo Rat distortion. Specifically, this is the model that they refer to as the Rat 2. And this pedal is a little bit different from all of the others on this list, because, you know, not only it's a classic, it's been around forever, since the late 70s. I think it was when the first Rat pedal came out. You know, but this is really this was actually a favorite among all the metal shredders in the 80s. Lots of those guys were using this pedal. If you follow my channel at all, you know that I absolutely love Rat pedals, and, you know, I love to collect them, and I own several different Rat pedals and clones and all that kind of stuff. You know, this one is, I mean, it's just, you just can't beat it. You know, I tend to keep the gain on it pretty low, like below 11 o'clock, because it can get away from you in a big hurry. You know, because this pedal is pretty unique in that it kind of walks the line between distortion and fuzz. And once you start turning that gain knob up past 12 o'clock, then you start hearing some of those fuzz characteristics come through Turned up higher than that, it gets really, really fuzzy. Not my thing, but if it is your thing, you got an instant fuzz pedal here on the board if you need it. But since it's not my thing, I like to keep the gain dial back, fairly low, which in this case is still plenty of gain to be had. This pedal, I believe, sells brand new for $69.99. Fun fact that I just learned, this is the only pedal out of Proco's entire series that is actually made overseas, which is how they managed to keep the cost down on this thing. Because all the other Proco pedals, all the other versions of the Rat in particular, are all really expensive. $150, $180, $200 at least. Whereas this one is still well under the $100 mark. They also just came out with a mini version called the Lil Rat that, in my opinion, is not that much smaller, but it's out there anyway. It will save you a little bit more pedal board space. It costs about $10 more, I'm assuming, just because it's a newer circuit, or a new version of it anyway. But regardless, the classic Rat sound, suitable for many, many, many different types of metal, well under $100. Number 7, the Joyo Dark Flame. If you are not familiar with Joyo pedals, they essentially have made their mark on the industry. They take clones of other well-known pedals and make really, really affordable clone versions of them, affordable and good quality clone versions of lots of other well-known pedals. This particular one is Joyo's take on the Rev G3 Distortion. The Rev G3, I think, costs about $229 last I looked. This pedal costs about $49. Extremely, extremely affordable, and it sounds great. I have not A/B'd the two pedals side by side, so I cannot tell you exactly how close it is to a Rev G3. But what I can tell you, even if it is slightly, slightly off, and not exactly identical in sound, it still sounds fantastic, and it's a great modern high gain tone. So especially for $50, how can you go wrong? Number 8, the Boss MT2 Metal Zone. Come on, you didn't think you were going to see a greatest cheap metal distortion pedal on this channel and not see the legendary Boss Metal Zone mentioned, did you? Of course not. Of course you didn't. You know why? Because nobody's a bigger advocate for Boss pedals, in particular the Metal Zone, than this guy. I love the Metal Zone. I always have. This pedal is not only one of Boss's all-time best-selling pedals, it's also one of the industry's best-selling distortion pedals ever. Those things have been around for years, and they're built like tanks. This one I bought, this is my original Metal Zone that I bought brand new in 1991. This thing's been on and off pedal boards numerous times, and it has never once failed me, not even a little bit. It was a pretty innovative pedal when it first came out because of the parametric EQ that it has there on the top. It's actually a 6-knob distortion pedal with the 2 knobs there being concentrics, and it's just absolutely legendary. It went through a strange period there for about 10 years, and the internet absolutely hated this thing. Then all of a sudden the effects loop thing was discovered with this pedal, and everybody realized this thing's actually really, really badass, and all of a sudden everybody loves the Metal Zone again. And Boss decided to capitalize on that a few years later and come out with the Wazacraft version, and this is one of the best sounding metal distortion pedals ever. Love this pedal a lot. But this is the version that you can still get for well under $100. Brand new, I think these are right at $100. Used, you can find them all over the place for $40, $50, $60, depending on condition. But if you do want to spend a little bit more, this guy has 2 versions of that circuit with upgraded components in it. The custom mode on the Wazacraft in particular is awesome. Number 9, the DigiTech TL2 Metal Distortion out of DigiTech's old Hardwire series. I have heard this pedal described as the Metal Zone, but for adults. And, of course, that description came out when there were still a lot of people hating on the Metal Zone. But that said, I do see where that reference does come from, because in this instance, you might again notice it's got 2 sets of concentric knobs there in the middle, making this a 6-knob distortion pedal, and also a mode switch there right underneath it for a tight and loose version. There's a lot of high gain metal sounds to be had out of this pedal, and it does sound a lot more sophisticated than my beloved Metal Zone. Just being honest. Sounds a lot more sophisticated, a lot more modern, and you know, really just, you know, probably, you know, better, you know, even maybe, I don't want to say better sounding because I love the Metal Zone, but you know, a lot of people do feel that way. These old DigiTech Hardwire series pedals are starting to go up in value. So, you know, ever since the cat was let out of the bag, that the reverb pedal out of this series is basically just the lexicon reverb algorithms that are inside that pedal. That thing, the price of that thing skyrocketed, and now all the others are kind of following suit. And you know, but this one I think you can still find for under $100. You're not going to find it for 40 or 50 bucks anymore, I don't think, but you should still be able to find it for well under 100. And number 10 is the Blackstar HT Dist-X distortion pedal. These old Blackstar HT series pedals are pretty unique because they were all tube driven, and they're just built like absolute tanks. I mean, you can see the size of this thing. I mean, it's going to eat up some real estate on your board, you know. And you're holding it in my hand. It feels like it weighs 3 or 4 pounds on its own. Not messing around, but it sounds phenomenal. When I first got this thing, I plugged it in, I was really, really surprised at how much I enjoyed the sound of it. And just as a rule, I'm a guy that doesn't really care much for Blackstar products. You know, they're okay. I don't hate them or anything, but you know, that they're all very, very okay. That said, I do have a very strong appreciation for their old HT series pedals. Now, this actually is not the heaviest sounding distortion pedal in this series of pedals. There's another one up called the HT Metal that is actually a 2-channel version, dual foot switch. It's not necessarily this distortion. That one actually does sound a little bit heavier, but this one actually does sound a little bit tighter, which for my purposes is really more what I am going for these days. One thing you do need to be wary of, these things all run on either 16 volt or 22 volt power input. And 16 volts and 20 or 22 volts, as we all know, is compatible with absolutely nothing else on your pedal board. That's kind of annoying. That said, if you happen to buy one of these and you happen to get one that the power supply is missing on, you can go onto Amazon and find a replacement, you know, aftermarket replacement for about 20 or 25 bucks. They're certainly out there. In the meantime, you can still find these for under the $100 mark. They're starting to go up a little bit more. Again, people kind of starting to rediscover, these old tube-driven HT pedals. But the Dist-X anyway, not so much the HT Metal, but the Dist-X you can still find for under 100 bucks. So that's it. That's my list of my top 10 favorite cheap metal distortions that I have shared with you here today, and I hope you have benefited from. Please don't forget to comment down below and let me know what your favorite cheap metal distortion pedal might be, because usually when you guys leave those comments, I discover that I left a few out or forgot about some altogether that would have been great mentions to this list. Because let's face it, if you ask me again tomorrow what my favorite list of these pedals is going to be, it's probably going to be different. But today, this is what you got. Adios.